It speaks volumes about the priorities of the federal government that the government is willing to go to war just to put a tax on you. I'm talking, of course, about the carbon tax, which Jason Kenney, the new Premier of Alberta, has made the first order of business of his government to abolish. Jason Kenney's government has already moved forward with legislation to scrap the carbon tax that was put in place by Rachel Notley, the former Premier of Alberta. And what does the federal government do in response? Well, Environment Minister Catherine McKenna says that she is going to put a federal carbon tax in place as soon as possible. This has been the federal government's prerogative, it claims, to, in the absence of a provincial carbon tax, tax Canadians itself. Now, we've seen this song and dance before. We've seen it in Saskatchewan, we've seen it in Ontario, and now we're seeing it in Alberta, which is why Jason Kenney has promised to file yet another constitutional challenge against the federal government. But the point that I've made very clear is that with growing opposition to the carbon tax, Justin Trudeau should accept that he's lost and walk this back. Because quite frankly, if you're going to pick your hill to die on, you don't want it to be taxing Canadians, taxing business, taxing families. But here's where we get into the dishonesty about where the government's priorities really are. You see, provincial governments and the federal Conservatives have been fighting against the carbon tax tooth and nail, saying it's a tax on everything, a tax on heating your home, a tax on buying groceries, a tax on filling up your car tank. All of that is true. But what the federal government has said is that the Conservative opposition to the carbon tax is taking money out of people's pockets. No, these aren't my words. I want you to look at this quote from the press secretary to Environment Minister Catherine McKenna. She says that it's like taking money out of people's pockets in reference to the attacks that are being waged against the carbon tax by Conservatives. And the rationale for this is that because the federal government has put this climate action incentive into your tax returns, that, any opposition to the carbon tax is stealing from you. I don't have any idea how 1 + 1 = Z in this case, but this is the argument that the government's trying to make, that they're not the ones taking money out of your pockets, the Conservatives fighting against the tax are. Well, let me tell you something, because I'm one of the 97% of Canadians that registered for and got the climate action incentive. But this does not mean that money is not being taken out of my pocket. I'm being given my own money back. And if a government is trying to take money and then give some back to me, they're still taking it in the first place. So I'm not going to give them brownie points for it. But the Liberals are trying to play this elaborate shell game with your tax dollars, and Canadians can't fall for it. A carbon tax is a tax on everything. It's a punitive measure against fuel, which is necessary in all parts of the country, especially rural areas in the north. It's punitive against business, because businesses have to either absorb it or pass it on to their consumers. And it's punitive on families, because you cannot go through your life without needing to partake in something that emits greenhouse gas. These are not the problems. And remember, we just had news a few days ago that China has been illegally emitting ozone-killing chemicals into the atmosphere. And again, we're supposed to believe that in Canada, our minuscule portion of emissions are supposedly going to cause global emissions to go down when other countries are not playing by the rules. Now, this is not an excuse to do nothing, but it's to say that the environment is never going to be saved by taxing families and businesses into the grave. And Trudeau and McKenna need to learn that. True North is standing up for you to advocate for policy that's going to keep more money in your pocket. We can't do this alone. If you can spend a couple of dollars a month to join my Heritage Club, you get some great bonuses, and more importantly, you support independent journalism that is more necessary than ever in Canada today. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.